Plan. And what you'll see up on the screen is the new downtown plan will be the Anchorage Downtown District Plan 2021. Thanks everybody for being here today, and many of you have been with us throughout this planning process, and we support your, we appreciate your input and support. Holly, you can go to the next slide.
Okay, here we go.
I also want to say thank you to 49th State Brewing for hosting our meeting today and providing some great food. Thank you to everybody who's on Teams with us. A little bit about the meeting. We'll do the land acknowledgement and welcome. We'll let everybody do a quick introduction, and then there's going to be about a 10-minute presentation, and then we'll have a facilitated discussion after that. We want to follow up with you between October 4th and October 7th to get your comments on this director's cut of the plan. We need your comments to us by Thursday, October 7th, and then the plan will be actually made available to the public on October 12th. It is with gratefulness and respect the planning team wishes to acknowledge the traditional homeland of the Dena'ina Athabascans and the contributions Alaska Native peoples make to our community and society today. We would especially acknowledge the traditional importance of the area considered for this downtown plan and for Ship Creek as the traditional first salmon ceremony site. And I apologize, Aaron, I don't know how to say your words.
The ICOC and the Lilac.
Thank you. So up there you'll see the planning team, Michelle, our fearless leader, the director of the planning department, myself, Christine, Tom Davis is with us today, and so is Daniel McKenna Foster. He's our new member of the long range planning team. Holly and Spoke Torres and Michelle are here with us from Huddle, and then Shanna's here with us from Agnew-Beck. Do we want to go around real quickly and just say hi, everybody?
We'll start with Nicolette.
Hi, I'm Nicolette Bennett from Anchorage First Fair.
Yeah, and Aaron Leggett, Senior Curator of Alaska History and Indigenous Culture at the Anchorage Museum and also the President of the Native American Council.
Jamie Acton, Public Transportation Department Director. Michelle McNulty, Planning Department Director.
David Kemp Foster, Planner, Long Range Planning. Todd Davis, Planner, Long Range Planning. Brad Boyd, Mr. Traffic Engineer.
I'm Shanna Zeskin with Agnew-Beck Consulting.
Mike Robbins, Executive Director, ACDA.
Jason Mojica, Treasurer of the Downtown Community Council, Property Owner Business Center.
Julie Decker, Director and CEO of the Enterprise.
Okay, now I'd like to go online. Who do we have online? Let's start with Alan.
Alan Kemplin, President, Fairview Community Council.
We'll go to Bruce next.
Bruce Bustamante, CEO of the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce.
Corey?
Corey Giordaliano. I'm an architect with Bettesworth North, located up in Fairbanks.
Shane.
Shane Locke, Municipal Traffic Department.
Mark.
Hi, Mark Kimmer, Landscape Architect with Bettesworth North.
Melissa.
Melissa Babb, Landscape Architect, Bettesworth North.
Michelle.
Michelle Fairbach with Huddle.
And Mike.
Mike Ward, downtown business owner and property owner. I'm also the vice president of the community council.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We hear you great in the room. We'll work on projecting here in the room so you can all hear us. Okay, go ahead, Christine.
All right, thank you, Holly. Thanks, everybody. So again, this is the Downtown District Plan 2021. What did we do? It was a targeted update to the 2007 Downtown Comprehensive Plan. And that targeted update looked at each section of the plan and figured out, okay, do we need to keep this? Do we need to change this? Do we need to update it? Do we need to revise it? What do we add that's new? So what we've done is we've revised the study area boundary map. We've revised the downtown plan vision a little bit. We've kept the 2007 overarching goals, and we've kept quite a bit of the 2007 plan content. We updated the economic and demographic information. We're calling the planning factors from the 2007 plan the development factors now. We have kept the 2007 design guidelines and some of the 2007 implementation actions. What's new to the plan is, and you'll hear a lot about this, is recommendations from the Oklahoma City delegation and from Smart Growth America. And those are strategies that they presented to us and recommended to us, and those are found on page 47 of the plan. To get to this stage of presenting the public hearing draft plan to our community, we have received over 1,200 comments from over 300 survey takers during this process. We've also had one-on-one interviews with developers. We asked them what's working, what's not, what would they recommend. We had 2 different subcommittees with 5 that were with 5 subcommittee meetings. That included white papers and recommendations. On 2019, we had a First Friday, and we asked the public during that First Friday at the museum what they wanted, what they liked, and what they would like to see the future of downtown. Let's go ahead and move on. So we've got a new chapter 3, and in the old plan it was strategy diagram. We now call it our revitalization strategy. We've got revitalization strategy map and revitalization policies and actions. And again, those are based on the strategy from the Oklahoma City delegation, and that talks about capitalizing on, changes to land use in our subdistrict. Oh, excuse me, wrong one. Got my presentation mixed up, sorry guys. Okay, so throughout the plan, you will read references to Oklahoma City and Smart Growth America. New strategies are introduced based on the recommendations from each of these groups. Chapter 3's revitalization strategy is based on what Oklahoma City and Smart Growth said to us and expands a few good blocks, which is that blue on the map, adds cultural districts, and includes opportunity sites, again on this new map. The East Downtown Fairview Tax Abatement Zone is one of the focused development areas, and then 3 cultural districts that are mentioned on here. Those include 4th Avenue, and then there's a historic area around 4th Avenue in the brown there, and then the Museum Design District, which is there in that bright yellow. So this is all new. In chapter 4, we didn't really have a land use plan map in the 2007 plan. So chapter 4 introduces a land use plan map, and this capitalizes on the strategy diagram from 2007. This includes changes to land use subdistricts based on plans adopted since 2007, and that includes the Ship Creek Framework Plan, the Fairview Neighborhood Plan, and the Historic Preservation Plan. There's new policies and actions included in this chapter, and then of course we include some information in there about our seismic areas, and just gives us kind of a new, different outlook to the land use in the downtown area. Sorry, I lost a page. Want my help? Oh, okay. So this is a new chapter 5, and this kind of replaces the program chapter, which was chapter 7 in the 2007 plan. And chapter 5 is now about quality of life. It has a lot of quality of life policies and actions. We heard a lot about creative placemaking. It talks about the importance of cultural districts and what it means to visitation and to our residents. It recommends again the signage and wayfinding, and it talks a bit about how we promote tourism and that nomad worker attraction. And so what used to be chapter 7 is now chapter 5 in the new plan. So chapter 6 is our urban design chapter. That remains the same. And like I said earlier, the urban design guidelines remain in the plan. Again, it's about northern city design. This remains focused, the focus of that chapter. And what we did add though is we've got a new street typology map in this chapter to better connect streets and the buildings. Our 2 subcommittees, which I mentioned a minute ago, had lots to say with recommendations that can go into this chapter. And the recommendations will help us streamline development and provide for that northern city design. Their input will also help inform step 3, which is the downtown code update, and which will follow after this, after the plan adoption. So we've got the Bettisworth North team on our call today, and I just want to make a shout out to them. We really appreciate their support of this plan too. They developed this little design, this beautiful design for us for Block 56, which is actually at the corner of L and 5th Avenue, and we thought it would be helpful for the plan to visualize a few types of new development in the plan, and so this concept is just a way for folks to visualize what could be developed downtown. Right, chapter 7, which is our transportation chapter, used to be chapter 5, but we moved transportation to chapter 7, and this speaks to our transportation and circulation strategies. We've also introduced some new recommendations into this chapter, and you'll see there the minor and major streets recommendations. We talk about transit connections. We also talk a lot about increasing bicycle use and pedestrian use in this chapter. The drawings that you see there are from NACTO, which is a group, a city transportation group organization nationally that makes recommendations on all kinds of different great ways to have your streets in downtown areas. And we may look more to their guidance when we complete a proposed downtown streets engineering study that's included in the actions in this chapter. So here's our timeline. We're here right now in October. I think I mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. We want to have the public hearing draft out to the public on October 12th. And we're here with you. We'd like to give you a few days to comment on the plan. So like we said, you have the director's cut. Nobody's seen that, just you guys. And we'd love for you to take a look at it and then give us comments on any of it. And then in December, we'll be going to the Planning and Zoning Commission on the 6th. And then January through February, there will be editing and publishing the plan for the Assembly. March, our Assembly public hearing and hopefully adoption in one night. And then we'll all be going to Club Paris to have a cocktail afterwards. And let our hair down. Or we might come back to 49 State. All right. And I did that one before we. Okay.
So I guess before we dive into talking details about how we're gonna get this plan done. I mean, the meat of this plan is really the implementation section. So, but before we do that,
I guess I'd like to understand first if anybody has any questions about anything you've reviewed so far. We have, oh yeah, here we go. We have the whole planning team in the room and someone will be able to answer your questions. Is that okay, Christine? Okay, so we'll go to Aaron first. Go ahead.
What was the rationale behind the recommendations from Oklahoma City?
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So Oklahoma City came to town a couple of different times, and then we actually went to Oklahoma City to see how they had redeveloped their downtown. And if you look at page 47 in the plan, like I mentioned, the plan strategies to help guide the plan. Number 1 includes focus the effort. Number 2, build great housing. Number 3, get important input from women in the community. 4, lead by example. 5, make connections with surrounding neighborhoods. And 6, make downtown safe. Oklahoma City and Smart Growth advocate for for all of these types of strategies to help revitalize downtowns. And it's worked in Oklahoma City quite well. If you go ahead and take a look on their website and how they've been able to revitalize over the past 20 years. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. But that's how we kind of migrated to include those into the plan and then use those as the strategies to try to help guide the existing goals that we had in the plan. And we know that focused effort is working because in I'm sorry, the folks that are at home, they can't see this, but we've got a board up over across the room there. And it delineates between 5th and 9th Avenue and I and L Street. And that's where development is happening downtown. And it's mostly muni or public owned property that's happening there, but we're getting new housing in that area. And so we feel like that focus the effort idea has been helpful. And so we wanted to go ahead and carry that forward into this planning process.
So, okay, any other questions before we dive in? Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I had a question related to the timing of some of the projects some of the priorities that are identified. And then, you have private development, you have public projects. The coordination between public development and private projects aligning so it's not just a scatter of all these different projects happening, but no real vision of a certain area. And so how are private developers, able to work with this plan to have a strategic, construction project that's developed and seen from beginning to end? And like, what would you recommend in that?
That's a great question. Who wants to field that one? Here, I'm gonna hand it to Michelle.
That's a great question. I think one of the major things that we're trying to do is have a downtown streets engineering study done. We know a lot of what the community has said back in 2007, continue to say today about different improvements that they want to say that will help development. So what that would do is it would look at the downtown core as a whole and kind of start to prioritize what those projects would look like. Ideally, as private investment starts to see where the public investment is going to be, hopefully that will help spur the private development in those areas. So it does look at, not just what road projects need to happen, but, for that prioritization is where's the land next to those projects that are probably teed off to be redeveloped. So that's one strategy.
So I have a follow-up. What if the private development project is ready to go? Can public development go faster? And this is the opposite way, just a question.
And as a follow-up comment, I appreciate you asking that, as a follow-up comment to that, right? I mean, part of the issue is downtown Anchorage is very tourist centric, right? Like we are Alaska's tourist hub. And so when construction projects aren't aligned, I mean, you know, the Key Bank Road is a great example, right? But, you know, if there were other developments that need to be done in that area, that would have been a great time to like coordinate that, right? So I know of other projects that are happening in the downtown area. I'm just trying to see, is it possible for the municipality and community to say, hey, like these projects are identified by property developers as like, we want to see these happen. These are the improvements that the city wants to make. It might not be at the front of the list, but maybe we can align those so instead of an impact of 2 or 3 construction seasons, it can happen at one. You know what I mean?
So I think we had a great example of that this summer with the aviator project and the Fourth Avenue project, because, you know, that was, I think, slated Fourth Avenue lighting improvement project was slated to go in 23. But for your exact purpose, we had, or to your point, there's a big construction during the tourism season and they didn't want to shut down. So that was able to move the Fourth Avenue project season earlier, so they were more. And that's a great part of discussion. One of the challenges is that a lot of public projects go through the bonding process, which takes quite a bit of time. So can we move faster? I don't know if Ron, you have any suggestions on things that are already in plan, but I think that's a good conversation for the purpose of this plan and making sure that we make that a priority to strategize. Sorry.
No, that's all. Anyway, if you don't know me, my name is Ron Thompson. I'm the Building Services Director, is the Director over Planning and Building Safety, so both for development services, everything for the city. So me and Michelle work pretty closely together now to try to get things together. We also work with Public Works, and we are working together. We've had meetings and have to decide how, and we started the talks on how to try to develop ways to help government help infrastructure work to where we can drive some of these private projects. So is it any decision-making made? No, we're in that talking stage of how this administration wants to move. So we are already discussing, we've already discussed with many developers on fairly large projects downtown. We've worked with Mike Robbins at ACA as well, to just try to find out, wait, what can we do? And so we're all in that infant stage of trying to create what we can do. But we all, I believe this administration is really aligned, like you're saying, is trying to find ways of what we can do to help develop and help work with that and kind of play a role to help spark some of this private development. So I don't want to go into too much detail because we're still just meeting and trying to find out what avenues do we might have available, what are other jurisdictions doing. So as people respond to things like this and act like this or review this and understand that, if you can give us ideas, if you know a city that has done something like that, I mean, people travel, they've worked in other places and they bring that to our attention, things in ways that's possible. I think that Michelle has asked in a big way, how can we help to do what it is that are in these plans? And so the more information we get, the more options we get, the more chances we can discuss it and move forward with ways to do it. It is challenging for sure, but I mean, it is open and it's open discussion already. So to me, I think that we'll get somewhere. This is how fast that can happen and then how do we get the resources. It's a little tougher right now to get resources, especially in grants and funding, but there are avenues and we've been exploring and talking about just kind of opening the window and saying, hey, everybody go look for ways, bring it back, and then we'll sit down and talk.
And not to belabor the question to the point, but to kind of Aaron's question about why the focus on Oklahoma, it's because in that kind of the focus area, Oklahoma did that. They really prioritized the projects they want to see in their downtown. They actually taxed themselves and said, okay, we want to raise taxes to do these projects. Once these projects are done, we stop this tax. And by them investing in themselves, the private sector said, well, they care about their health, then we care about themselves. So I think that's why they're using this example to kind of get to the heart of this question.
Just to follow up on that too, in the plan, we have a housing czar, right? So in the plan, we recommend basically a downtown czar. It's in there. And the other thing is with the utility and the urban design subcommittees, they said, why don't we create a coordination process with all the utilities And, while you're doing that too, how about if we do this gap analysis in downtown, see where we need to do improvements in the utilities, where we need to do improvements in, and so that's gonna be a whole process that we'd be able to do too, and that again is in this plan. And if you guys see this action item and you say, well, wait a minute, I think you need to add this or that or whatever, that's the kind of things that we wanna hear from you.
Okay, we have enough time. So any other questions on the content that you've read or heard so far before we dive in? And any questions online as well? Otherwise, I'm just gonna start making a downtown to-do list. No one's ever done that before. Just kidding. Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna
This is
hand.
Alan online.
Okay.
A question?
Yeah, Alan, we're gonna do one in the room. I know that we've done them all in the room, but we're gonna do one more in the room and then I'm gonna go back to you. Okay, hold on.
Has there been input from the Acres Historic Preservation Commission? Because I don't really see it in the report. I mean, they are referenced, but there's no specific sort of anything to lead me to believe that they had, input.
I believe the answer is yes. I'm gonna hand it to the Historic Preservation Officer to tell you more.
Hi, yeah, I wear a couple of hats for the Muni. I'm the Historic Preservation Officer for the Muni, and then I staff the commission. And we have been bringing the commission on all along as we've been developing this plan. They will be reviewing it just like everybody else and commenting on it. But there are some specific things in the plan that reflect what was adopted into the Historic Preservation Plan for downtown. So yeah, they've been involved. That's a big question.
Keep it. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the, how much attention has been to ownership of the transportation, facilities, particularly the streets.
You mean municipal versus state designation?
Right, because I saw the images that were presented of examples of more balanced approach to development of the street cross section, but there's a significant difference between the what you can do currently in a street that's owned by the state and a street that's owned by the municipality.
All right, I'm going to give that one to Christine.
Yeah, sure. Great question, Alan. In the plan, we recommend a downtown streets engineering study, and that came out of what we heard the public answered back about. There were several street conversions mentioned in the 2007 plan that never went forward. And so we felt like with all the proposals that were in 2007 that actually didn't get done or were not considered, that maybe what we should do is do a follow-up study and take a look at, well, was any of what anybody was recommending in the 2007 plan, would that really work? So we're hoping to get funded this downtown streets engineering study, and then we would have a conversation with all the community and the traffic and DOT and PF, and by the way, they were invited to this meeting today too, to figure out what to do about the downtown streets, and do we need to talk about ownership and things like that too.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're gonna go to Julie next.
Sure, thanks. Hopefully Aaron will come back in and contribute, but we started today with a land acknowledgement, and I saw on one of these pages that I've lost now, a priority to recognize the cultural heritage and the Dena'ina people, but then on the action item table, I'm wondering if there's a way we could also start with that land acknowledgement and the critical need to recognize the Dena'ina people in that action plan. I'm not sure I'm seeing it in any of the specific items on page, I guess it starts on 114.
So I'm with you on prioritizing that as a theme, right? I think I'm going to draw highlights of where I see it in the action item so far. I think there's an action item Q, quality of life 6. But I guess, what are you thinking about bringing that up as a more of a theme throughout the action?
Well, yeah, we'd be happy to add that in. Keep in mind though, the action items are very brief. And in the actual chapter of the plan, we talked more about denying culture and that kind of thing. So if you look at the actual chapter, there's discussion in there, but we can definitely add more to the action items.
I wonder if it could be part of a preamble before the action items, just making a note that for each action item, that should be a consideration.
Is that what you were thinking, Julie?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about if this gets adopted or has legs, that it needs to be seen in the action item section of the starting point.
Sure, thank you.
You can keep it. I'm right next to the mic. I'll run it around the room though.
Can I make a reminder to everybody that didn't sign in, please sign in? Thank you.
Okay, so I guess, so what Christine wants to do with the brains in the room is we tried to focus your attention. I don't expect all of you have read 120 pages of downtown plan. Anybody?
Almost done.
Michelle McNulty read it, you guys. That's a good thing. So I guess what we want to do now is we want to start going through these action items and start identifying, because the downtown plan won't get implemented by the planning department only, right? It's not going to get implemented by one entity. It's going to take parks. It's going to take ACDA. It's going to take private development. It's going to take museum. It's going to take the downtown community council. It's going to take all of us working together. So as you have reviewed these action items, and I guess I want to start, maybe let's just do one that has already come up. Let's just do one that's already come up, which was the transportation. Engineering. It's T&C, which stands for Transportation and Circulation. Action item 1, fund and complete the downtown streets engineering study. Who leads that? Who's the implementer of that?
We're going to go after AMAT's funding.
Okay. Who,
So AMAT / with the traffic engineering department.
Okay, so the idea is planning, AMATs, and traffic. So I guess my other question is, when people are looking at this plan, are they looking at these lists of action items? Are those prioritized 1 through 6? Should people view those as a priority?
We did prioritize them, and if everybody can take a look at page 112 of the plan, at the bottom, there's acronyms for MOA agencies or departments. So we've got ACDA, Anchorage Historic Preservation Commission, APD, Geotechnical Advisory Commission, Parks, Planning, PM&E, Traffic, Transit, and then our community partners for the 2007 plan were the Convention of Visitors Bureau, the Chamber, DOT and PF, AEDC, Museum, Railroad, Downtown Partnership, Downtown Community Council, Fairview Community Council, and then potentially Native Village of Apuna. So those are just the proposed implementers, and we don't really want to put people on the spot today, and do we? Oh, she's looking, yes.
I mean,
put people on the spot.
I don't want to put people on the spot. I think you want to have a conversation with these leaders in the room, right? So I think what we should do is so let's start with RVS1. There's only 4, right? Let's let's start with those revitalization strategies. Yep.
And I think it might be helpful for everybody to also talk about how we establish timeframes, that it's a combination of complexity as well as funding, and while something might be a priority, if it's really complex or requires a lot of funding, we may put a later time frame to it. Doesn't mean it's not a priority, it just means that realistically, we won't be able to get it completed in a year.
Right. Right. Agree. So Christine, you have 4 strategies for revitalization strategies. One is about prioritizing capital improvement processes that align with areas, the focus areas of the plan, okay? One is about assigning somebody whose job it is to coordinate those projects. We heard a lot about private development and utilities needing to be coordinated in order to make sure infrastructure projects were doable, fundable, and then create the investment marketer position. So maybe we just want to talk about how are we going to do all that in the room? Who's the lead? How are we going to get those things done? And Christine, you might, in order to get the conversation going, you might want to say something like, we were thinking that this is how it was going to happen. What do you all think about that?
Sure. So I'm going to go back to the subcommittee meeting. We had all the utilities as a subcommittee, and they met twice. And it was their idea to look at the utilities, what MOA has, what AWU has. Actually, this should be all of the utilities, not just AWU. And look at the CIPs for all of the utility providers and the muni, if the muni was going to be doing any street improvements or anything like that, and figure out how we could align our capital improvements programs to get just what Jason was trying to mention there. And the utility subcommittee wanted to create this coordination process person that could be essentially in maybe development services or something like that, that could bring people together, you know, once a month or something like that, to have those discussions, but also to have that discussion if a developer was coming in on a project and to be there early on.
Okay. So now knowing a little bit behind the scenes, what do y'all think about that? Is that something that's possible? Can it be done? Yeah.
Of course it can.
I know, I'm just saying, like, so yeah, we know it can be done. Where's it happening though? Is this a development services position? Go ahead.
The only thing so you just showed us a page that said MOA agencies or departments that participate. And not one participation to this point has had development services in it. So to assign development services as an implementer of a process that they haven't even been a play role in seems a little bit strange. So I would think that you have to add them into the MOA agency department, get them a part of it, and then maybe play a role. And yes, I think that it can be done as a whole. But also, you got to watch out with those naming conventions, because anytime that you create development services today might be different after the budget is passed in a month. It could be a whole different makeup of development services, if that makes sense to you, because we might be changing the way different departments are on different things. So as it being development services, we don't know yet if development services is going to be the department that I'm heading up, and then building safety and planning is below, or if development services stays the same way that it is today, which is really just right away and building safety, if that makes sense. So kind of got, I mean, it seems like right now what you would do in that case is probably put community development rather than development services, because we're all part of the community development department, if that makes sense. And so So we gotta just watch boxing ourselves into terminology that we know that community development is going to stay, and that's a fairly large thing. The rest, we don't know how it will sort out. So I would leave that as community development, and then that would allow both, planning to do it, or development services to do it, or building, but whatever, project man, whatever it would be, it would all fit under there, right?
Okay.
As well as if you wanted to take project management and engineering, because they're also part of community development, so therefore it kind of covers whatever way we go. If we get too refined, you'd have to go back, and then all of a sudden the plan is not really referencing the right spaces.
So any other ideas maybe on how this cross coordination can happen? Any other ideas that maybe aren't on the table right now? Like, how can coordination for capital projects be improved? Go ahead.
I just have a question, like right now, because I don't know the process, that's why I asked the question, but can there be someone in the municipality that is basically assigned, like, as that point coordination person saying, hey, like, if you're a private developer, you have an idea, like, talk to this guy, and then he's gonna know who's to talk to in the agency, and then that's at least one person who could be identified. Maybe they have other roles in the municipality, but at least there's a contact person that can facilitate both sides of the conversation. I don't know. That person exists.
I mean, that position is why my position was probably created. So, is to try to do that and bridge all of the different development, right away, permitting, everything together into one. So I would say, and that's why I'm, don't go too specific, because we don't know how the final outcome of that is going to be for sure. In 6 months we will, and so we get there, but right now we probably don't. But we are going to have that position that you're talking about. And if we leave it as community development, then it will cover it no matter what, if that makes sense.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I was gonna say I don't know if someone from PM&E is actually on the call. So if not, I'll speak for them, but currently, one of the things that Kent Colgate does is he does do a coordination effort with all the utilities and all the undergrounding projects. And, it's a once a year thing. They pull in, DOT, all municipal projects, and then any utility. And so that RBS one is already pretty much happening. So I think if you leave that and then extending that to working with the CID, which I think they pretty much do that mix, that's an easy mix. And then I think you start coordinating it with that position where you sort of bring in the private development ideas. We use similar modalities. I think we're almost halfway there to achieving.
All right. Who wants to describe a little bit more? I know we're spending a long time on this, but I think this is an important strategy in order to get capital projects complete. Who wants to talk about the investment marketer position? What is that? What does that mean?
That was a person that is going to help interact with the banks and the financial community to help us potentially create a gap fund so that we have all these incentives that developers can apply for, but there's still a little bit of a gap sometimes. And so the plan is proposing that we create a gap fund, and we don't know how to do that yet or how that would happen. But that person would be the person that would manage that gap fund, potentially get applications. They would have a group that they would report to, and then another way to help bring development to downtown.
Would that position also actively be kind of marketing potential investors, like potential companies that we want to see into the community?
Yes.
And is that something similar to what ABC does?
Very much so.
Okay.
I was just going to say, is this a municipal position?
It may not be.
Wouldn't that say create the investment market program? Because then you don't, rather than position, because it may be a multitude of, not just a position. Just creating a position to me doesn't mean you're gonna fix anything. It's just throwing money in a position that may or may not. I mean, now, to me, developing a program defines that you have to follow some time. But developing a position, it seems like a plan shouldn't be developing a position. It should be developing a program with a strategy and a function to get to where we, that would be my.
What do you think, Bill? He can.
Online here. Bill Pop with Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. I think what we need to be doing is looking at models that other cities are using successfully across the country and hundreds of cities across the United States. But we've got a list of 14 or 15 that have attracted our attention that we've looked at in the past. Oklahoma City, I heard earlier, probably one of the great success stories of taking a town that nobody wanted to live in at all, were fleeing as fast as they could graduate from college, and they turned it around into a very vital and vibrant city. Carmel, Indiana, Bend, Oregon, Boise, Idaho, Cincinnati, Cleveland. There's just a wealth of cities that go different ways. Sometimes this position kind of strikes me as kind of trying to straddle too many bridges. Or is first and foremost a municipal, almost ombudsman for investment to help investment entities, whether they're local businesses looking to deploy capital in a new investment, or outside entities, which we need a lot more of, putting money into the community that are putting it into large projects, small projects, medium projects, full loan investment proposals. They need a point of contact that can help them to get the entree into the systems, help them to point them towards the person within community development that can coordinate their needs to understand the system, and then to help connect them to organizations like mine who can work with the private sector to get them into the resources, relationships, and the endorsements from the existing business community that this is a good place to invest. This one's kind of weird to me, the way it's worded, and, because it's marketeer, well, okay, that means they're gonna be managing a marketing budget. And they're gonna be going out and pressing the flesh and doing, sales shows on the road and stuff like that, having absolutely nothing to do with deployment of actual capital in the community. So I think that one, it's not quite where you want it to be in terms of the wording of the verbiage.
That could be reworded.
Yeah.
I like Juan's suggestion of program, like investment program. Kind of generic, but it gets to the heart of, I don't know.
But you still need a contact person. Yeah. You're out and then.
Yep, okay. I'm not gonna get into that level of
Okay.
wordsmithing, I don't think,
Sure.
but I hear it. We hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to move on to land use?
Well, there might be a little bit of overlap between that land use, that -1 there, and then the one up above that we were just talking about.
Yep.
So it may be that we want to combine those two a little bit. We can, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so the land use chapter ends up having 20 actions. Okay. For those of you who have reviewed the land use actions so far, are there any that you want to talk about before I dive in? Or from the planning staff, are there any specifically that you would like to dive into before I dive in? Yeah.
The only thing I would do is continue on each time that instead of identifying that you need a position, I think it needs to be a program, because you can't have success if you end up developing a program that you don't need a position. When you call for the position, you may never get to the success of that item. So I think it needs to be open to something separate, any kind of language, but directing in a plan to direct how the muni hires its people seems to be not the place for it. But the idea of what it's about is important and makes a lot of sense. So I would just say in general, I would rather see this not identify, say, we need this position, we need this position, we need this position. We need a program that develops the result that we want. Not, and that may or may not involve, but it allows the community to progress with a position or without a position, without that being the success or failure point of your item. That makes sense.
It does. Okay, so let's move on to LU2. Let's talk about housing a little bit. You can get into the details of what you were meaning with LU2. Fund and complete the 2040 housing needs update, land use plan, housing needs update to determine the percentage of affordable and market rate housing options possible for downtown, including an assessment of the impact of additional tax incentives for these types of housing. Go ahead.
So and Tom can probably jump in here in a minute on this one too, is we will be updating our housing needs assessment. I think it was, the last one was done in 2012. Yeah. So this is basically a housekeeping project that will help us update that housing and help us move forward with being able to update 2040 as well as benefit the downtown plan, because we'll be looking at downtown too and what the capacity could be for downtown.
Okay, so I'm going to read through a few of these right now, and I'm going to, I envision the planning department will take the lead on a lot of these things, but I guess what I want the planning department to say is where you think you're not going to take the lead and where you need assistance. Yeah, so I'm just going to go through quick. Amend 1235 to incorporate longer time frame for new commercial development. Create land assembly and site control strategies through municipal code to support redevelopment. Create guidelines for short-term vacation rentals.
That's not planning.
Okay, who is that?
That's a good question. We've talked about this with the tax appraiser's office for some time. Let's put TBD. That's a touchy one.
Establish the municipal downtown capital improvements tax zone with voter approval to fund specific infrastructure improvements to specifically support new housing in downtown. So you see what all these are doing. All these are talking about how to incentivize more development downtown, right? Where do you need help?
So, Holly, with LU6, this is similar to what Oklahoma City did, and I think Bill mentioned it and Michelle mentioned it, where they did this MAPS, and they're actually in MAPS 4 right now. So they've had MAPS 1, 2, 3, and now they're in 4. And it's where they identified improvements that needed to be done, and then they, the community agreed to tax themselves on that, and then so this was, they were able to accomplish quite a bit. So this is basically on the same level as that, and I would think that the muni would potentially need help with like ABC or ACDA on this one, because it would be, well, basically a marketing and, you know, we'd be bringing together a bunch of different tools to say why this is good for downtown.
I think we also need to bring in the tax assessor's office.
Yeah.
Christine, will you talk a little bit more about what a gap funding? Does everybody in the room know what a gap fund is? If everybody does, I guess that's fine. Gap funding for housing.
Well, if any of you guys have had a chance to look at the work that AgriFact has been doing over the past couple of years to develop pro formas for the development that's occurring in downtown, as I think you worked on one for Girdwood too. There's this little bit of funding that's still needed to make projects pencil, and so the gap fund is being proposed as something that, you know, I don't know where the money would come from or anything else, maybe from this tax zone or something like that. And, that would help us, that's another incentive to help make new development happen.
Any thoughts on that one? Whether if it's just you want to talk about it more or?
Is Alan on the phone?
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I would encourage folks to consider an action item that gets more participation by the local banks in this issue, and also brings in Alaska Housing Finance Corporation as more of an active partner. Both of those are sources of capital for investment within the state, and they have the flexibility to provide long-term financing for new investment, but I don't see them being really identified as a key player in the revitalization of the downtown area.
Cool, thanks. Go ahead, Bill.
So we've been at AEDC, the board of directors has formed an ad hoc committee that's been looking at the incentivization issue and focused both not only on housing, but on commercial development, et cetera. And have used some of the work of Ag2Bec that has analyzed the gap in funding to make projects pencil. And the issue is one more of what is becoming known more and more as patient capital, cheap money that's willing to wait for a very long time to pay back, comparatively speaking. Banks are not going to be interested in patient capital. That does not fit their for-profit model. But Alaska Housing, ADA, we've been having some preliminary conversations with them just to understand their tolerances and their capabilities within statutory authority that they've been granted. We're trying to get into a conversation with them now about looking at a couple of model projects that were previously presented in other forums and digging into those a little bit more to understand in more detail and at their request. So they are interested in this. Community outcomes such as this plan may be critical for them to be able to do it in a designated area. ADA has expressed that to me, AHFC has expressed that to me in conversations with leadership in preliminary scoping, just trying to get a sense of what's the playing field look like. There's a lot of work to be done on this. But right now, ADA and AHFC can partner on projects statutorily, and could be for like mixed use developments, housing on top, commercial development on the bottom, other models along those lines could be possible paths to involve, but there needs to be a lot of dialogue about what they need, perhaps additional state statutory authority from the legislature. It's a complex issue. It's missing because any of the projects have just basically been shelved for the fact that they don't pencil in the current economics.
Okay, so like things like this are going to take a lot of dialogue to implement. So you mentioned one thing, which is a specific designated area on the map in order to implement projects like this. This is how this plan can help, right?
Region within the city.
Yeah.
So downtown would be a definitive area recognized as an area that ADA, for example, could craft programming that would allow maybe, I don't want anything to be said construed here as they're going to do this.
Right.
Was asked, but that could potentially offer financing tools to come in and fill 20%, 30% gaps in the project with patient capital.
Okay.
4% money over 20 years, 30 years.
Okay. So the planning area for the downtown plan could be like, and could the plan, because we're talking about focus areas in the plan, right? I mean, could the plan be more specific than just downtown? Or like, you see what I'm getting at?
You want to make it for all of Anchorage?
Well, no, I meant like smaller than downtown. Smaller than downtown, like maybe a few good blocks, that sort of thing.
I won't answer that question definitively other than to say I got the sense that they need a little bit broader geography to work within, such as a downtown scope. Quite frankly, it's not that big.
Right, agreed. Okay.
Well, and I like the idea of downtown because we have concentrations of empty parking lots in different parts of downtown. And while we're talking about focusing the effort, there's still a few little outliers where there could potentially be property which actually AHFC owns that we could bring some new development in.
Yeah, I just want to note that what would be helpful is if one of the recommendations was to develop a really kind of a strategic housing strategy, for the downtown area that identifies roles for both the short-term, capital sources from as Bill mentioned in terms of the banks, but also for the patient capital sources. Right now, we don't have any framework to guide those two entities in directing investment, and I think it seems to me that might be a good approach.
I need to add on just real quickly what he said. And that's absolutely a important concept that I think the plan needs to incorporate is measurable outcomes that will result from the investments. That is one of the things that's been invoked in multiple conversations. Alaska Industrial Development Export Authority and Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. They feel strongly that they can craft programs if we have measurable outcomes that investments can be measured against as contributing to. So, for example, we've got a housing strategy for downtown, but to what purpose? Are we trying to grow the population in the downtown census zone from less than 1,000 to 5,000? 10,000?
I don't think we have a housing strategy for downtown.
No, that's what I'm saying, is that we need those kinds of metrics. And that's my point, is that they want to see those kinds of metrics and outcomes. For Ada, they're not going to be involved necessarily in the housing, except there's an argument about whether or not they can invest in rental, commercial multifamily. Ada doesn't seem to think so. AHFC doesn't seems to think so. Others, Ada is reticent on that particular point. So these are going to be other issues where we may have some vacuums that need to be filled. But Ada will want metrics like how many more storefront businesses and workforce will result in downtown Anchorage as a result of investments that they provide patient capital for. And so those goals over a 10-year period, as an example, will be critical for them to be able to formulate specific investment strategies at BRGs.
Okay. So, Christine, I guess in your mind, that's something that should be added, correct? Like, and Shannon, yeah, I was gonna put you on the spot, Shannon, but now I'm done. Go ahead.
Just please on that housing. I'm going to. Thanks. Just on the housing outcomes, the existing plan does talk about units. What was it, like 2,000 units, by a certain date? So it seems like carrying those metrics over, updating them a little bit, even knowing that we'll do a study in the future seems like important for this plan. The commercial outcomes probably, there's probably more work on that.
So who does that? The planning department? Do you want to do a comprehensive housing study for downtown?
I think that we could do that, maybe even with conjunction with real estate services.
Perhaps within ranges though, okay, 2,000 units of housing, how many people does that result in? What are the consequences and then there's a policymaker involved in this too. People downtown or the assembly and it's something that needs to be tangible public to understand. Units of housing is very esoteric compared to we're going to put 10,000 people.
I'm going to give you the math.
I think the reality too is that we talk about gap funding for some of these projects is, that's really going to have to be a function of government. It's going to have to be a function, I think, of the federal government grants and You know, it's great to talk about some of these things, but I think the private market's just not got a stomach for that kind of stuff. And so I think we need to pursue some incentive strategies for downtown and extending the ones that we've got so that we could provide that gap funding. Because realistically, talking about, you know, Ada and some of these other folks, they're just not, I mean, I think that's the long way home. The short term is to try to get the municipality and the state and try to find some other federal programs we can put together to make something like this happen. And I think Bill is right that we need a housing strategy that identifies, you know, we were just talking about workforce housing downtown. And the reality is you're not going to build a workforce house. You know, we're not going to go across the street over here and build workforce housing. It's too expensive. So we need to look at a strategy that possibly develops workforce housing on the outskirts of the corridor out in the Fairview area that's close enough to people who work down here that we could afford to build the housing there. So I think we have to look at it realistically. It's great to say we want a lot of housing in the downtown corridor, but you know, we have to be realistic. I think that's what we expect to happen. So.
Okay. Moving on.
So real quick, Holly,
Yes.
I think in response to what everybody's saying, I think it would be great to have the action item in there about this strategy. And then we could update the plan. We do have some numbers from the last plan that we could look at and potentially bring in. But like Bill said, you know, just saying X amount of housing, X amount of hotel rooms, X amount of commercial space is what the 2007 plan sold. Yeah.
I don't want to get into too much of the details of this, but one of the questions I had is, do we just look at downtown specifically? I think to Mike's point, we almost need to look at the whole entire Anchorage Bowl and do the strategy. I mean, what does make sense of all the housing that we need? What makes sense to really focus on for downtown?
Wow, we just got bigger. Okay.
Well, part of the
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
strategy, if you're going to develop downtown, you have to have housing for the businesses down here. So I think it's, you know, just stepping just a little bit outside of downtown and trying to figure out how do we do that. I think is.
If I can add to that comment, I mean, one of the biggest challenges I've been in Alaska faces is the HR issue, right? We got vaccinated this year. We're trying to find employees, but if Alaska continues to grow, we need to figure out how to get employees up here, whether they're low-income workers, they're mid-grade, or they're higher-level paid people, and create housing. Bring in, I don't know how many managers here, probably like 10 to 15, subsidizing housing for them, because literally they won't be able to not only afford it, but find it if we don't make that happen for them, right? And we're just one business, but it's not just here. Alaska's got to solve this issue in general, and so I just wanted to serious economic inhibitor if we don't get the employees up here that we need and solve the housing. Because remember, a lot of these employees that come up here, probably half the workforce that I brought up here this year, half of the 150 people, 75 are staying in Alaska because they said, you know what? Coronavirus, everything else, I want to move to Alaska, right? So now we're shuffling around, like trying to find housing, like where are they getting vehicles? It's a mess, you know what I mean? But the good news is now we have 75 more workers in Alaska than we did last year, right? And that's happening all across the state, right? So.
Christine, can you draw me to a place in the plan? Do you talk about workforce in the action items?
I'm not sure if we necessarily say it in the action items, but in the body of the plan. Yeah.
Okay.
Could I interject?
Please, go ahead, Alan.
For the housing strategy, this is really, I'd like to follow up here on this notion of, that was mentioned about, the workforce and how, providing, looking for investment opportunities over in, Fairview is in order to make things penciled out. I think that's important, and people need to be looking at that. But there's also needs to be a recognition, and this gets back to that question about transportation, and that is, this engineering study needs to be more than just an engineering study for moving cars. It really needs to be looking at really the street typology, because people who are wanting workforce housing, they don't necessarily want to have a vehicle, right? But they do want to be able to move around and get to their place of employment quickly and safely. So having certain streets designated as more pedestrian streets versus making every street an auto street is, I think it's an important concept. And it's important to be able to look at things in a more holistic, fashion in terms of the urban space and how it's developed.
So there's two places where this shows up. There are lots of action items in the transportation and circulation action items, but also in urban design. Urban design action item 6 makes a specific recommendation to add street typologies to the Anchorage Bowl street typology study and map. So I think that's getting at what you're talking about.
Yeah, and again, the key thing is making the connection, the explicit connection, between affordable housing and the street, the type of streets there are, particularly as it relates to from the east side of the downtown area and in Fairview, which are more affordable, and how they connect to the economic engines that exist in the urban central business district and the more higher end properties down there in west downtown. Maybe that's why it's important to have a strategic housing initiative, so that we look at things in that sort of focus.
Okay, so we're getting some people trickling, and I just want to make sure that more people don't do that before we talk about the things that you want to make sure to talk about.
Well, I guess maybe I want to hear from anybody online or in the room. Is there any burning action item that they want to talk about? And yeah, why don't we do that, since it's 2:17 and I don't know how much longer folks are going to be able to stay on. So
go ahead, Brad. Should I go right to transportation?
Well, I guess the transportation is pretty simple in my mind. Pretty much everything that's in the transportation needs to be looked at in the transportation engineering study of how everything works together. There are a lot of different players, all the different modes, like Alan was saying. I see that being a key part. So almost all of them from 2 on, it kind of is all based on the results of the number 1 of the downtown streets engineering study. The other thought I had was on a lot of these are the action items, but what are they trying to accomplish? And so maybe having subheaders that say something like improve the transportation, improve the ability of the bike network to connect to the trails. And then a lot in land use and others, it looked like they were targeting different bigger picture approaches or strategies or ideas.
Yeah, because throughout the document, you can have strategies, and then the action. Those actions are tied to those bigger things exactly what you said. But I wonder if there's another way we can't pull that into the implementation as a reinforcement. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, so looking at just this table, which I focused on today, that's true, it's a good point. Maybe throughout the rest of the document, there is that. So, yeah, that's a good point.
But I think your point is good, you can bring it back.
Yeah, so that, because what's going to happen is people are going to use like these pages. Let's go to Jamie.
Jeez. Sorry, don't always need a mic. Can we go back to transportation real quick? I'll claim an item, but also need help with the assembly.
Okay.
Maintain low-income worker relief bus passes. TC 5.
I don't know what I did. Okay. TC5, go ahead.
Yeah, so our fares are in code. The assembly will have to approve any sort of modification to that. But the low income passes and potentially fare free is something that we are currently looking at. You can claim that item.
Nice work. So I guess though, can I talk about transit a little bit more? Like,
sure.
Is there anything else from transit's perspective that you might think would be important to incorporate into the downtown plan? Or like, is there something the downtown plan could help you with that you haven't seen here? Or maybe it's just fine. Maybe it's just fine the way it is, but I guess I just thought I'd ask that question.
Bart and I were talking about this a bit, but he's out on leave right now, and so I think that's something that we might circle back around on, because I know he's got ideas that he would definitely like to share from a planning perspective. But I think, you know, for us, we just need a permanent home. We need to know that we're going to live somewhere and we're not going to be going anywhere. And, you know, right now we're temporarily relocated, and there's challenges with that. Our customer service area is not in the same spot as where the buses are being inconvenienced. So we want to make sure that that is housed together at some point, even if it looks much different than it does today. So Bart and I will definitely, 15-minute headways. Yes, more of those.
Yeah, which one are you looking at right now?
13.
Okay, yeah.
We would like to see all of our 30-minute headways to 15, and then our 60 to 30. But any of the transit supported corridors, probably looking at Tom for this one. You know, that's something that we have been championing, you know, ever since the plan came out. So I think that's one of the biggest things for us.
Okay.
I think 10, I saw TC10, which is the coordinator ride share between the different, would that be something transit would be done to take on?
Yes, and that's something that we actually are doing.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna focus attention to participants in the virtual room. Does anyone online have anything you might want to bring up from the action items, something that you want to talk about specifically? No? I'll bring it back to the room. Anybody else? About quality of life? There were some fun things that showed up in quality of life. Promotion of downtown, marketing, branding, honorary naming of parks, Alaska Native place names, Alaska leaders, cultural facilities. These are just the things that make it, you know, fun, honor our heritage. Yeah, go ahead.
Has Visit Anchorage been part of this conversation?
I believe so, yes. Christine, have you engaged Visit Anchorage? You have, right? Yes.
We interviewed them early on, yeah.
Yeah. These are all kind of collaboration between parks, downtown partnership, Visit Anchorage, the museum. Yeah, go ahead.
Something I've been thinking about a lot is wayfinding, and I noticed that it comes through in many different action items, and of course, we just having to coordinate that with the plan. And then hers as well. Big opportunity.
Okay, well, I think I'm gonna let you have the final words, Christine. I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure we've talked about what everybody in the room wants to talk about.
All right, do we need to go around any
Anybody else? All right. I just want to tell everybody thank you for taking the time. If you would like to meet with me individually in the next few days, let me know, and yeah, we can get together and talk about any other projects, or, you know, where you think that there maybe should be updates or something like that to the action items.
But I think the final message is if you have specific things you want to write down and tell us before this goes to the public on October 12th, we'd like that by the 7th, correct?
Yes, if you could get any comments to us by the 7th. And the other thing too, though, is we're going to have basically a 2-month public process where people have the chance to comment to us during the 2 months before we go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then again, we'll have another 2, maybe 3 months before we go to the Assembly to bring more things into the plan. Yeah, so this isn't the final.
Thank you. Those in the room, we can collaborate a little bit more. Thank you to everyone who participated online. I hope it was bearable for you as a hybrid meeting. Thank you. All right.